I want to take the honor to introduce Tal Lazar. When I approached him, he knew about software, but he didn't know about TPM. But in your profession, like filmmaker, educator, and tech founder, and as a former developer, you can fully relate to what we're doing, and therefore, we will speak today about lessons of authority from the films. And with that, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next slide is my slide.
Yes.
Okay. So hi, everybody. I'm here to give you a short break from AI. The next half hour, we can let that go. How great is that? Earlier, we had some conversations, and I said that I am parachuted from outer space. So maybe sometimes we need to go to outer space to see things in a different perspective. And this is what this talk is really all about, especially relevant to the people sitting in this room, because we see New York City from a different perspective of this floor. Hopefully there'll be some pictures or some visuals for people online to see it later. I will only say before I start, because the microphones are hidden somewhere, if I need to increase my volume, that speaker is installed. Okay, so I'll start with something a little weird. Maybe this entire presentation is complex. Bear with me. Charlie Sheen. There's a documentary right now on Netflix. 2 episodes. Charlie Sheen is talking about his life, his crazy career, all sorts of stuff that happened. And there's a moment in the first episode, I think, about half an hour in, where he talks about his children and he puts his coffee cup down. And then he quickly apologizes and he starts over. It's something that if you're not a filmmaker, you wouldn't even think twice about. You wouldn't notice it. But if you're a filmmaker, you would know exactly what just happened. And I'll explain. You know that in movies we have the 3 shots. Even if in a scene like this, close up, medium shot, sometimes peak camera, sometimes one camera. This is not neat. Actors know that when they do anything that generates any sound, like putting a coffee cup on the table, they need to do it between words and not over a word, so that later, when all these shots are combined together, it can be edited easily. Maybe they do it more than once and they put the coffee cup down in different times or all sorts of stuff like that. So just by forgetting about it for a moment and then restarting, which is probably not even necessary in a documentary, Charlie Sheen showed that he knows a little bit about sound design. He knows a little bit about editing, probably also about directing, all fields that have nothing to do with acting when you think about it. But there's something about knowing a little bit about other people's jobs that makes your job, let's say for an actor, less takes, less effort, easier, and definitely other people's job easier too. And that's part of what we'll talk about today, the in-between, something that starts sounding maybe a little bit familiar to all of you. So before that, I'll talk a little bit about myself. For 20 years, I worked as a filmmaker, primarily as a cinematographer. For 15 years, as a professor in some top-going schools in the States, and a founder of 3 companies, one of them a tech startup. When I tell this to people, they sometimes look at it, like, what's the connection with all these different things? But for me, it's very clear. And that's actually related to the talk we just heard in the past hour. It's all about change. Because stories, and obviously movies are all stories, are all about change. Forget conflict and all that stuff. Something has to change in the story. If nothing changes, there could be 10 conflicts, they'll still be bored. At the end, something has to change. Education is all about change. You learn with change. And companies are built on change. You see a problem and you solve it. So when I was preparing for this talk, I thought of the role of the TPM very much as an agent of change as well. This is our groundwork. When we start, I think that you'll start seeing there is actually a lot in common between the fields that are, let's say, creative fields, filmmaking, and the role of the TPM. Specifically, I was a cinematographer for many years. How do you study to become a cinematographer? You go to school, one of the things that you need to learn is lighting. How do you learn lighting? You go to a soundstage, you have somebody sit or stand with call them standings, and you start moving lamps around it, seeing the effect. It's a pretty good way to learn about lighting. Maybe you can even become an expert in lighting after this, after a while. But it does not make you sitting in front of it. You go to set and suddenly you realize that actors don't just stand comfortably waiting for the lamps to be moved around. Actors move around, they interact with each other, and suddenly you're in trouble. Same thing happens to directors. Directors learn about performance, staging, and all that stuff. They do it pretty well, but they don't learn much about cameras and lighting. So they come to the set with all the knowledge of the director, and suddenly they're in trouble. Again, we're in the in-between. And that stuff is not really learned. You don't learn it in film school, you learn it in practice. To me, it's a language gap. Right? Something about the connection between roles that nobody knows exactly how to glue together. Another example for this from the world of movies is this scene. Great film, No Country for Old Men. Great movie. So it's a pretty simple scene. This guy is lying in bed in this cheap motel and he can't sleep. He sits up and he turns on the light, and in a few moments the bad guy is going to come to the door, hell breaks loose, all that stuff. When you watch the scene, it flows pretty naturally. You don't think of filmmaking or anything like that. Immersed in the story. But for this to happen, I just want to show how complex the process is, because this is not the hotel room at all. It's from a soundstage. Somebody designed this. And when they designed, put the door in front of the bed, it's actually according to the staging of actors. That's done by the director in practice with the actor. That light that's over there and creates this beautiful lighting. It's part of the job of the lighting designer that works with production design. And of course, the cinematographer puts the camera in front of it to create these beautiful images. You could say that this is actually a pretty complex process. And somehow this is happening without any of these different professionals, production designers, cinematographers, knowing much about the job of the other people. Ask the production designer about lenses, probably most of them don't know much, or ask the cinematographer about building sets, also limited knowledge. In movies, we don't have project managers, we only have the director. So the director needs to manage all of that. And maybe you start seeing that there's an overlap between your job as a TPM and the job of the director. The director only has really two things going for it. One, a vision. So in this context, and I'll get back to vision a little bit later, a vision is what we have to say. But in movies, we say things in more than words. We express, right, through images, sound design, music, all these different things. But behind all of it, there's an idea, there's a meaning that needs to be expressed. And the director has that. But the director, of course, doesn't do any of this himself. Cinematographers, composers, all that stuff. So the director needs to have good communication. That's it. These are the two things that the director has. That's how you make a movie. It sounds a little weird, but beyond that, if the director doesn't have any of these, there's a... So to me, that raises a big question. How can it be that the director can lead with confidence and authority such a big group of people who probably know about their own profession more than the director themselves? That would terrify me. How would you lead that? That's a big question, but I would even make it more complicated. It's not only that the director needs to lead all these people. At the end of all of this, all these different mediums come together in a magical way. Just think of the best movie scene that comes to mind. The first image that you have, I gave you some ideas here, at least from my perspective. You remember a movie scene not because of one thing. It's a combination of stuff, right? It's the music and the performance and the images. They come together, and it's bigger than the sum of its parts. So the director needs to manage this and create magic. The puzzle pieces fit together perfectly. So if you tell that to a directing student, they get a heart attack. How is that possible? Well, maybe you think if the director gets their authority, from the title. They are the director. So that probably means something. And maybe they have experience, a lot of experience when they find themselves in that situation. But there's some great examples of directors who did so well in their first film. So what is it that the director brings, and can we learn something from it to apply when we manage our own teams? It all starts with vision. And we promise I'm going to explain this huge image that I just put in front of you. Because vision has these two sides. It's something that you know, something that you want to express that other people don't know, but that they assume that you have by the function of your position. So this is an advantage, and it can also put you in trouble. First of all, no one sees what you see. It's a pretty lonely place to be, right? And also here, maybe there is a part of the job that you have actually very much in common with the director. You know what it's like to be told, no, right? Directors get told no all the time. This here is from a movie I did a while back. The idea was to shoot a scene underwater in this pickup truck where the hero is trapped in the cabin. So naturally, we wanted to take a pickup truck, take a construction crane, and dunk it into a water tank. This just begs to be told no. It's absurd, right? And there's a picture. We did it. So the job is to get stuff done, even if it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. You get resistance. And the secret, of course, of it all is, well, I can't actually explain myself to everybody over and over again. That's inefficient. People need to agree with you because of something else. So that's maybe the difficult part of the job. But the other side of it is that you are sitting on a hub of information. And that information can be used to create this shared mission that brings everybody together. So the big thing here is bringing people together. And to me, this is the spectrum between isolation and integration. When we start working in a new team or in a new company or a new project, and we don't know what's going on exactly, the tendency is always to isolate ourselves. Our job as leaders is to bring people together. I mean, on a movie set, just think about it. An actor doesn't know how the image of them actually looks. They only know their job. Or a composer doesn't know how long a musical piece needs to be. They need to be told that in order to create something that fits into the final edit. The director does that. You probably are familiar with this phrase attributed to Julius Caesar, divide and conquer. Maybe at worst, great and wars doesn't work well for leading a collaboration at all, because our job is to bring people together. Another area, or another field, I should say, that this is exemplified is the conductor of an orchestra. I think that that's a common comparison to PPM. I've saw that in all sorts of places. The conductor of an orchestra doesn't need to know how to play each one of the instruments. But the conductor of an orchestra does need to know the capabilities of each of the instruments, how far they can be pushed, what are the limits. And the conductor needs to know how to speak the language of each one of the players. But this is something that needs to be emphasized. The conductor speaks with the violinist. It's not a conversation between a violinist and a violinist. It's a conversation between a conductor, bigger picture, and a violinist. And there's a big difference there. To me, from the world of movies, it very much reminds me of scenes that have a lot of visual effects. Right? Imagine yourself being on a soundstage and literally interacting with air. Imagining the things that you are reacting or engaging with. And then after this is done, somewhere else, there is someone sitting in front of the computer creating these worlds. And these two teams never meet. And there's actually few people who visit these two spaces. And the director is one of them, who needs to not only speak the language, but somehow take something from one place to the other to ultimately create this experience. A lot of people are involved in creating scenes like this. Partial, very, very partial list. I don't need to tell you, you've seen the amount of names that roll at the end of even movies without heavy visual effects, right? You know, a few years ago, I did a workshop at a company in Hollywood, a lens company. Lens companies, like maybe any other company, they had their engineers and technicians, sales teams, marketing and operations and executives. And this was a big company spread around this building. Some people never even talked to each other. And my job was to try and bring everybody together a little bit. So when I do these things, I usually start with asking people what they do, but I have a little twist on it. I ask people to describe their job like they would do it to an immigration officer at the airport. You want to be truthful, but you don't want to spend too much time there. Gotta do it quick. So, okay, I got it. You know, sales manager, lens technician, CEO. These definitions, these job descriptions are very isolating. They're describing the function, but they're not helping us look at how we bring ourselves together as a team. So what I ask people is to consider and imagine themselves as filmmakers. Because at the end of the day, even the operations team, those are the people who, let's say, ship the lenses out. That's one link in a chain that at the end, some production assistant, who's already a filmmaker, takes that lens and gives it to the camera team. Or the lens technician doing all sorts of like focus and flare stuff. Yes, there's obviously a technical aspect, but there's also judgment. There's nothing, no technical truth to this thing. They make creative decisions that affect how these tools are going to be used. So slowly, through recognizing these things, we ended up with some common ground that allowed people to look past their specific function and look at the shared mission. That's the important thing that we want to do. Because when we are isolated, we make assumptions. I think that you know that assumptions are the enemy of collaboration. You've already encountered it in the workplace. Assumptions are usually wrong. What we don't know, we have to fill the picture with something. This is where the job of the leader, especially in a collaboration, is so important. We need to provide the information to fight those small assumptions. I mean, imagine this guy, great image, right? But the actor doesn't know why the light is off. All he's concerned, somebody forgot to turn it on. From their perspective. Now, let's say that person could become a little frustrated. Maybe they had a argument, the lighting designer yesterday. They think they're doing it deliberately. An easy solution would be to show this picture. Look how great it looks. That would probably appease them. But that's not really possible. It's not possible to show actors every picture. This is the easy side. The equivalent of a picture, bigger picture for you, is not something that you can so easily show people. No, instead, it needs to be trust. This person needs to feel that they're part of a mission and that if they're in the dark, then that is for a reason, right? And that they trust that it's okay. Somebody has the intention and somebody is seeing this. All comes back to vision, and I want to make an important distinction here between an objective, a goal, and a vision. Objective is just what we were trying to achieve. A vision is what it means to succeed in achieving it. This difference between the surface, the text in movies called the script, and the subtext, what's underneath, the bigger meaning, is something we talk about a lot in movies. And I'll give you an example. You know this image, you've all seen it before, and before. And I show this to people and I ask to describe this image using only one word. Let's not argue. This young woman, only one word. Think about it. What would you say? I hear from people when I do this, I hear accusation, connection, request, powerful words. But the funny thing is, when I do this and I just say, describe what's going on in this image and don't limit to one word, then I get something like, a young woman in red is staring at the camera. That's the difference between text and subtext, between the surface and the meaning. Now, I think you'll agree with me that the purpose of a portrait is more than just to show that somebody was there one day looking at the camera. The purpose of this thing is to actually deliver that one word. And I promise you that if we had more time, it would compare the words that people are thinking, they would be very similar, which is another whole part of magic, how everybody understands it the same way. So in our world, the world of TPM, how does that translate? Well, think of the project that you're working on, but not as an objective, what it means to achieve it. I especially like something like an internal system that actually means connecting people together. This is the door into creating a bigger platform to connect people together, to take them out of the comfort zone of their own position, which they might know really, really well, and start bringing them into the in-between, which is where we are, where we need to operate as authority. I did this earlier, right? With change. We are all agents of change. This is a different perspective to look at something that's very, very familiar to you, but to put us in common ground. For this, there's two things, much like a movie director. You have the vision, that is the bigger picture that you want to deliver to your team. And you want to do that, making everybody feel essential to that mission. But at the same time, also give the sense that even though you're essential, you alone would not be able to achieve it. In the team for that. So you have the vision. And like a director, communication. For communication, we need the what. Okay, that's the vision. We need the how. That's language. And we need to speak the language of our audience. We need to speak the language of our team members. But to me, language is more than just vocabulary. 50%, let's say, is vocabulary, and the other 50% would be to actually know the person who's in front of you and understand how they communicate. So it requires getting to know people. And finally, and maybe most importantly, feedback. So the biggest and most experienced communicators also need feedback. Think of the biggest filmmakers, Spielberg. When they edit their movies, everything is almost done. Almost towards the end, they do a test screening. They bring in an audience, screen the film, audience fills a questionnaire, there's a moderator for a discussion, the whole thing. It almost always, it changes the film. Scenes are deleted, added, reshoots, all sorts of stuff happens. So if the biggest filmmakers do it, we don't have any excuse, right? Feedback. We are the ones giving feedback, so we need to demonstrate the fact that we can also receive feedback and not exclude ourselves. This is the cycle of communication. Early in my career, I worked with this guy, John Hurt. You might recognize, he's the dad from Home Alone movies, was in The Sopranos and some other movies and series. He was the first bigger Hollywood actor that I worked with. And I remember the first day he came to set, I was terrified. He came in, walked straight up to the camera, pointed at it and asked me, what lens is this? That was really weird to me because no actor ever asked this question. So I said, it's a 50 millimeter. He said, okay, there's wide lenses, there's narrow lenses, 50, somewhere in the middle. Okay. He went on, did the scene. And it was only later in the day that I actually understood why he asked me this thing. And it changed entirely the way that I think of leadership. He needed this information to know how much of his body is in the frame. And he actually did adjust his performance accordingly, which is pretty amazing. Up to that point, I thought that my authority comes from my experience and what I know. I know so much about cameras and lights, lenses, people know less. That makes me feel confident and allows me to do my job with authority. But that moment flipped it entirely. From that moment on, all I wanted to do is share information. I went to the makeup artist and I told her the next shot is going to be a wide shot because I know close-ups need a little bit more time for makeup. Saved us some time. Told the location manager that tomorrow we'll see outside of the window, so maybe we need to move the trucks. Saved us some more time. Time is everything, whatever we said. I just tried to find more opportunities to share my information. In the picture here, that's me standing a director with the lens. The situation would terrify me in the beginning. Lens is mine. But I just started giving and giving and giving, found a really strong footing and authority on this act of sharing information. And this is it. This is what we do. Our job is to facilitate the sharing of information because it doesn't come natural to people. Facilitate that, create a common vision so that everybody feels part of that team, and bring people into that gray area of the in-between. Once they're there, you're home. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed.